Welcome to This Explainer. It's funny. Have you ever noticed how you can forgive almost anyone in your life with just immense, completely unearned grace? Except the person wearing your own face. It's so common. Today, we're going to dive deep into Carl Jung's brilliant psychological framework to dismantle a truly toxic mental trap. That habit of offering grace to literally everyone but yourself. We're going to break down the exact internal machine you might be caught in right now, and most importantly, learn how to finally step out of it.
Let's set the scene. I want to place you in a very specific scenario that you might honestly know a little too well. It's 3 in the morning, the house is totally silent in that heavy way that really only happens in the dead of night. You aren't in crisis, nothing bad happened today, but suddenly, entirely out of nowhere, your mind reaches back a decade and pulls up a completely closed case. Maybe it's a single sentence you said to a parent, or a moment you fell short in front of someone you really admired. Why do we do this? Why do you relitigate these closed cases in the dark?
Because when this happens, you aren't just gently recalling an event, right? You are physically reliving it. There's this sudden flush of heat right across your chest. Your stomach just drops. You are relitigating a closed case at full emotional resolution. This is not just a memory. It's the rereading of a guilty verdict to an audience of one. It arrives as this incredibly dense, physical climate of shame that moves through your nervous system way, way faster than logic or language ever could.
Now, this whole trap actually starts with the critical difference between guilt and shame, and they are completely different beasts. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Guilt is about behavior. It has an exit. You can apologize, repair the damage, and just set it down. But shame? Shame says, I am the mistake. It is essentially a life sentence without parole for the simple crime of existing. When you're someone who feels things deeply, you are uniquely built to drown in shame while mistakenly believing you're just dealing with everyday guilt.
To really figure out why we do this to ourselves, we got to look at Carl Jung's concept of the persona. Basically, the persona is simply the mask we wear to meet the world. It's the role we play to function in society. For most folks, it's just a handy social tool. But for the highly sensitive person, someone who maybe grew up constantly having to read the emotional temperature of the room just to stay safe, this mask becomes something much, much heavier. You've essentially outsourced the judge's bench to everyone else. Because you were so tuned in to everyone around you, you constructed what we can call the mask of goodness. You became the helper, the reliable one, the one who just absorbs the discomfort so absolutely no one else has to deal with it. You built an entire identity out of pure goodness as a survival strategy. But here's the trap inside the trap. When your entire armor is based on being perfectly good, any ordinary, inevitable human flaw doesn't just feel like a minor mistake, it feels like terrifying, catastrophic exposure.
And this brings us to a massive danger that Carl Jung warned us about. He said, the danger is that we become identical with our personas. When you fuse completely with that mask, that violent 3 a.m. alarm going off in your chest isn't actually your conscience at all. It's simply your shame panicking that the mask of goodness is slipping. It's that terrifying feeling that the real, imperfect you is about to leak out and be discovered by the world.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this. Your relentless self-hatred is not what makes you a good person. Actually, scratch that. It's not even close. A working conscience informs you of a misstep, helps you do better, and then it releases you. What you are experiencing right now is a malfunctioning conscience. It's a state of permanent self-prosecution, cleverly disguised as morality. You are looking at a psychological system that is in violent overload, literally smoking and screaming, and you proudly call it virtue. Let's look at a fascinating, if maybe a little uncomfortable, concept from Jung to explain this self-punishment. Inflation. Jung defined inflation as an expansion of the personality beyond its proper limits, a state where the ego actually swells way past its real human size. Now, normally, we picture this as massive arrogance, right? Just pure grandiosity. But Jung understood that inflation has a hidden shadow twin.
See, normally we look at the grandiosity of light. That's the person walking around thinking, I am uniquely superior, chosen, and gifted. But then we have negative inflation. This is the deep-seated belief that I am uniquely guilty and completely unforgivable. Refusing to forgive yourself isn't humility, guys. It's a dark grandiosity. You are basically claiming to be the one exception in the universe. You are making yourself the main character of a cosmic trial where your totally ordinary human errors are somehow the ultimate unforgivable sins.
Let's ground this with a story straight from the source material. Think of him as the man who fixes everything. He's 47 years old, incredibly steady on the outside. He holds his family and his job together absolutely flawlessly. He is the rock. But privately, he keeps a nightly ledger of every single failure. He lives in a psychological cage the size of a coffin. His outward, perfect competence is actually just a frantic fortress that he built just to outrun his internal shame.
So where did all of his ordinary, messy human flaws go? Well, they went right into the shadow. Jung defined the shadow as the self we disown in order to become acceptable. It includes all the repressed thoughts, the messy feelings, the rage, the needs, and the appetites that we just cannot bear to hold in the light. To protect his shiny mask of goodness, the man who fixes everything swept his entire humanity off the stage and locked it away in a dark basement.
But here is an absolute unbreakable law of psychology. You cannot integrate what you condemn. Exiled flaws do not just politely disappear because you ask them to. The great illusion is thinking that building a heavy wall against your shame keeps the monster out. In reality, you've just locked yourself inside with it. Those banished parts go completely underground, and they end up steering your entire life from below. Alchemists and psychologists alike recognize a stage called nigredo. Sounds intense, right? It's the stage of darkening and decay, the psychological descent required before true transformation can even occur. Jung saw this as the completely unavoidable confrontation with the shadow. The problem is you've mistaken this necessary, temporary dark passage for your permanent address. You think this descent is a life sentence, rather than just a tunnel you are meant to walk through. So, keeping all of that in mind, let's completely reframe that 3 a.m. loop. It is not a punishment, I promise you. It is your unconscious, with infinite patience, desperately asking you to integrate an exiled fragment of yourself. The memory keeps returning, not to torture you, but because the part of you that you banished in that moment is knocking on the door, waiting to be let back in. The shame is just the battery powering the memory. Your psyche is quite literally trying to make you whole again.
Which brings us to what I think is one of the most profoundly devastating realizations in all of Jung's work. He wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem. What if I should discover that the poorest of all the beggars is within me? It is so easy for you to feed the literal beggar, to forgive an insult, to extend infinite grace to a shattered friend. But the ultimate terrifying test of your empathy is turning it inward and realizing that you are the beggar who stands in need of the alms of your own kindness."
Okay, so how do we actually break out of this trap and dismantle the trial? 3 things. First, you've got to stop filing your everyday feelings as evidence against yourself. Second, withdraw entirely from that 3 a.m. courtroom. The goal isn't to finally win the trial. The goal is to stop attending it altogether. And third, treat yourself with the exact same unearned vast grace that you pour out to your friends. The memories are going to remain, yes, but when you do this, I promise you they will permanently lose their teeth.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. I really want you to sit with this question. What is the verdict about yourself that you need to finally overturn? It is time to aggressively forgive yourself and dismiss this internal trial forever. You are allowed to be a beautifully flawed human being who has a past. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope tonight you finally step out of the courtroom.